You're listening to the She Lift Project podcast, a show dedicated to helping women achieve higher levels of success in the workplace. No matter where you are in your career, we want to help you grow. Now here's your host, Cynthia Kirkpatrick, a CPA, CFP, and Senior Financial Advisor at Moneta Group.
Welcome to another episode of the She Lift Project podcast. Thanks for joining us today. We have Melissa Gragg. We're going to talk about business valuations, mediation, financial divorce, litigation support, how you do all of that, how you got there, your expertise. And what I love on this is the psychology of negotiation. Negotiation's hard.
Yeah.
And so the psychology behind all of that, you bring that expertise to the table. Love it. I'm sure I didn't capture it all, so you'll definitely fill us in where we need to fill in and tell us more behind all that. So thanks for joining today.
Thanks for having me. This is delightful.
I know the work you do covers a broad spectrum, but what is it exactly that you focus on?
I would say I'm a financial strategist, and I come in with negotiation theories. I have a background in M&A, investment banking, and business valuation. And so foundationally, it's based on numbers, but I understand the legal system in the fact that I've been an expert witness for over 20 years and a forensic expert for the better part of that time as well. So it's really a financial strategist that combines all of the pieces and then pulls from really business valuation knowledge of how to cement those numbers in financial stories. You know, it's not just the income statement and balance sheet, but it's telling a story through the numbers. One of my passions is working with the outspouse or the person that doesn't understand the financial picture the most and educating them on what they could attain in a court situation or a negotiation, and then also understanding what truthfully would be reasonable in their situation. So it's protecting them from themselves, but also educating them so that they can make the right decision for themselves.
Yeah, it's so many places we can go with all that. I mean, valuations for businesses, for divorces, for mediations, for everything. I mean, explain that for those of us who are out there going, whoo, that's a lot.
Yeah. And I think it kind of started with like my love of the negotiation process, you know, so I started kind of in the M&A investment banking when it was really popular, you know, 20 plus years ago. And it was, you know, I was looking at these big deal makers and I was like, wow, what, you know, like, how do they get to where they were? Like, how do they know how to negotiate? Because every deal is so different. And as I've gone through my career in looking at not only selling companies, but doing it in more closed environments, and then divorces, which are definitely a closed negotiation because you're just two people and you can't leave until you've come to a deal or you go to court, right? So I started to kind of understand that there were actual patterns. And what nobody told me was there were patterns to the negotiation. Now, you have to understand my father's a psychologist, so I've been in therapy against my will for a lot of my life. But I started to kind of mirror like what were the patterns that I would see, and were there consistent patterns when there's coercive control, when there's one, like almost a power imbalance. So one person knows the money, and you see that a lot. You know, one person knows the money, one person is just sort of like, everything's taken care of, right? Well, those negotiations, there's a power imbalance, but power has some unique characteristics that they negotiate kind of in a more lazy behavior. And so when I could see the patterns emerge, I was like, well, okay, let's see if this happens in real life. And so I used those techniques in mediation and would just change them. Like, oh, okay, this didn't work. Okay, how do I change it? And I can give a good example, but like that's the gist of it, is like there's psychology, there's paying attention to people's movements. You know, once we hit COVID, everybody was doing things online. So it was like your facial expressions, you know, when you're like, oh, or all of these things that are basically your tells. And so then it became like, how do you pay attention to the tells that somebody is not even saying words, but they're telling you everything you need to know? And how do you pivot in the negotiation? So that became just kind of fascinating to me, I guess.
When you said you were fascinated with negotiation, I think, and maybe I could be wrong, so many people think negotiation and it just makes their spine tingle, or like they're just, So it's interesting to me that you were drawn to it or pulled into it because you were so interested.
Most people are conflict averse, which means that they don't want to fight in their personal life. They don't want to argue for what they deserve at a restaurant. They don't want to send something back. Like, these are just normal behaviors that people operate in. And women tend to have more of a placating mannerism. So they're going to, appease the room. They're going to, the people pleaser is the ideal kind of person. And when you start to look at high net worth, high conflict issues, then you start to see like the power dynamic is so off balance, And so even in mediation, most people who are practitioners in mediation went to mediation because they didn't like conflict. So you have an entire population in the conflict averse area, whereas what really helps when you're in conflict is to expose the truth, right? Because if we all actually negotiated from the truth, we probably wouldn't have as difficult negotiations, because we're not lying, we're not manipulating. We're like, oh, there's only a couple ways. And in math and finance, like, there's only a couple ways to split things. Like, there's not a million different ways to do something. And so when you start to see that there's just a handful, operate from the truth. You're not negotiating. I'm more empowering people to say what they want, to get clear on what they want. Because if you're going into negotiation, it's not I'll go high and you go low. It's what do you want? How do you prove it out? And then how do you stand on it until you get it? And that's a very different play than I'm going to go for the moon and you're going to go for nothing and we're going to meet in the middle. Like, that's what the legal system does, is like, well, we call it split the baby, right? And so you go high, I go low, and the average is in the middle. Is the average ever the true value? Never is the true value. So it's a little bit of valuation, but it's a lot of how do you position a number? How do you, what we call it, anchor the deal? And it's when I wrote the book, Anchor the Deal, I didn't really think there were such distinct patterns until I started like drilling it back. And I'm like, oh gosh, like these are so very clear. Why hasn't anybody talked about it? And I was like, well, I'll just use it for good and help women negotiate when there is a power imbalance, and not from fear tactics, not from you're going to do, like these old school kind of patriarchal control. Like, I'm going to show you where we're going to go, and then you're going to go there because it makes sense and it's logical, and people will default to that.
So you mentioned the patterns a couple times. What are those patterns?
So the patterns are, and I learned it because I had a lot of strategic clients. And so I was doing business valuations, and most business owners don't want to sell their company. Like, that's the misnomer. If you're successful and you're making money, most of the time you just want to make more, right? Somebody could come to you and say, do you want to exit? And you're like, no, I love what I do. I don't even know what I would do if I wasn't doing this, right? I mean, I see 70-year-olds and 80-year-olds still operating in business. So I was like, okay, well, how does this work? Like, how are they going to exit? How are the baby boomers going to exit if they don't want to exit? They were being approached by like other people in their field. And they're like, you're the best. I want to merge with you or partner with you. So that became a closed negotiation. And most people in mergers and acquisitions would say, well, that's not how you do it. Like, you get a whole bunch of people, like competing. And if you don't have the competition, you're never going to eke the price higher. So I was like, okay, well, how do you eke the price higher when you have somebody just coming and wanting to buy that company from you? Like, that would be typically the worst deal. You prove it out with financial information, your historical picture that's painted a little bit prettier, but foundationally sound. And then you have to show them the market and what's the risk and like, what are your intangible, like beautiful, like nobody can see your amazing shoes, but like maybe that's the whole outfit, right? You know, like those types of things you have to showcase. So I started to think, okay, well, if I anchor the deal at the value that I want, then they have to negotiate off the deal. The deal's never going to be higher than where I position it, but I have to position it with sound data. That's not my voice of like, I want you to pay a $5 million for my company. And the other person's like, well, my budget is $4 million. Neither one of those are actually about the company or about the deal. So when I started to see that pattern, I was like, okay, wait a second. What if you always led the negotiation? So old school negotiation is you wait for somebody to offer something. This is very different. Anchor the deal is you create the deal that you want, your most ideal offer. In a divorce, it's your most ideal settlement position. And you anchor it strong with data, with backing, and then you have to have leverage and timing. And leverage is, how do I convince you to come to my number regardless of your budget, right? So in a divorce, I have to have stuff on you, right? I have to have, like, you moved money, you hid assets. I don't have to know exactly where it went. I just have to expose that truth. And then you're like, ooh, well, she found some of it, but she didn't find all of it. You know what? Maybe this is a good deal. Maybe I should settle for this. And it's kind of a similar process in selling a company. You know, like if I show them what it's worth, they then have to come back to my buyer, my seller, and say, we don't think you're worth that. That conversation doesn't go really well, especially when you really want to like buy that company. So you avoid this awkwardness of like, you think your company is worth 5 million and I come in and I'm like, well, my budget's 2. This deal is done. I don't have any desire. And I've had business owners that are like, oh, you don't see the value of my worth? This is my baby. This is everything. And you don't think it's worth $5 million, I'm not going to talk to you about the deal. The deal breaks. And so I saw these deals breaking just because of like uncoordinated negotiation tactics. And I was like, let's try this. Somebody comes to you and you tell them what they're going to pay for it. And they're like, oh, the lawyer's like, that's never going to work. And I was like, well, let's try it. And it worked. And I was like, wait a second, we might be onto something. So then I flipped over to divorce and said, let's try it there. Let's do the same thing. You're the person that doesn't know the money and you make the offer. Well, that's unheard of. Not if it's logical, if it's based on some sort of data. You know, we had a case that came in, they were for 12 months trying to figure out what the value of this company was. There was like 10 people in the first Zoom and they're like, how long is it going to take you to figure out the value? And I was like, well, I could tell you what it is today. And they're like, how is that possible? I was like, you guys missed one document. There was one document, one piece of paper that had one number on the tax return that indicated what the income was, at least from a net income. And I just backed up into the value. And do you know what the other financial experts said, whether they were on the call? They were like, yeah, that was sort of the range that we were in. And after that, everything shifted towards how I negotiated, because in one day, I did in 12 months. It's not finding all the data, it's finding the leverage that moves it. And then the timing comes in because you got to end it. Now, if you want to end it sooner than I do, I just sit back and wait, because you'll end it faster and you'll end it at my number. So I just have to be patient. We talk a lot about chess. It's just like one move at a time. That's the patience. Nobody's patient in negotiations. They're like, I want it done, because they're conflict averse, right? I don't want to be here going back and forth. Oh, this makes me so nervous. Sit in it. Wait. Be patient. They'll come to you if it's founded. If you're not just like, oh, I think it's 10 million, right? Nobody wants to play that game anymore. But so it's a completely different way of looking at things.
I'm sitting here thinking, like, how is she so confident? How is she so, okay with quote unquote conflict negotiation? although I think you just answered that question, that if you're coming to it, sitting there with data, you can sit in that, you can be confident, and you wait.
Yeah. Yeah. And most people don't understand the game of chess. So I think this analogy is sometimes lost on them, but it's calculated moves. And so in the negotiation, if you understand money and you understand financials, there's only so many different ways that something can go about. So this isn't a new negotiation each time. It's that the patterns exist each time. How are you going to be prepared for the unknown? But the unknown is just still like maybe 3 decisions, right? So you get to an unknown, a fork in the road, and you're going to go left, right, or maybe like a random, curve, right? If you already practice going into the mediation or the negotiation, because even if we're negotiating for a big deal, I'm going to practice with the business owner. I'm going to practice with the person that's getting divorced. And I'm going to tell them one thing. You don't get to say yes until I say yes. I take everything off of their plate. They're not going to sit there and be like, oh my gosh, is this a good deal? And have that facial expression, have all of those tells in the negotiation. I'm going to sit back and say, when I tell you it's a good deal, and I tell them what I'm going to say. But until then, I let them lead the negotiation, because a lot of business owners want to lead this, or they want to be a part of it, right? Or like lawyers want to be a part of it. I let them lead the negotiation, but I don't tell them all the moves. I don't tell them. The client will know. The clients walk through, but not all the players in the room. There's an element of surprise that needs to happen so that we can actually have this whole thing work. But at the end of the day, I'm very clear with them that I will look to them and I will say, this is something we should consider. Maybe we could take a moment and talk. That's the yes. Now you can say yes. And you can never just say yes to any number. Even if they came in the first number and was like, we're going to give you 6 million. And you're like, yes, I wanted 5. It's always got to be yes and. So it's yes and, but it's not a monetary and. It's a intangible and. So it's yes and, when is this deal going to close? Or yes and, let's negotiate the lease or the employee contract. Or yes, this is a great deal, but because if like right now you said, hey, I would love to buy those shoes, and I'm thinking $100 and you get these shoes, right? Because I paid $50, and you offer me $300. My immediate response is going to be yes. And what are you going to think? Dang, I could have offered less. Right. So you're going to retrade. And it's called a retrade. You're going to try to retrade that deal and be like, oh, you know what? I meant to say $275. And now I'm going to feel like crap because I didn't get $300. You're going to feel like crap because you still feel like you're paying over the two. Like, nobody is happy. So we do something a little different, and we say that, like, you're both too far off the mark. Like, if I'm in a mediation, I'll be like, man, you guys are so far apart. So far apart. Because there was one time when I said, you guys are so close. Like, we are so close. This is so great. And you know what happened? They both moved apart. They moved further apart because they were like, well, if we're so close, I'm giving up too much. I should ask for more. So I was like, okay, that didn't work very well. So I came back, next mediation, different clients. And I was like, wow. And they were really close. And I was like, man, I really wish you guys were closer. So I need you to come with your best deal. I need you to come with your best deal. And I kid you not, they were almost at the same deal. So now I have to present it, right? So now they both made it better. They both came further apart, closer together. And I said, you know what? I think we have a deal. What else do you want? What was your, additional thing you thought you couldn't get? So you add in that layer of like fluff, if you will, right? Like when you're at the car dealer and you're like, oh my gosh, I got this car. Can you throw on the car mats? You're not negotiating price. You're negotiating some of the intangible things around it that makes everybody feel good because they locked in that price. Like, oh, I got that price. But yeah, I'll give you the floor mat. Oh, yeah, I'll give you a soda. Like what you want a meal? Like what, because that joy and that fun is in that one little number and that price. So you have to let them have their fun And if it's a great fund, but you also have to like layer in one more thing so they don't think that they got screwed. So it's just interesting, like things that you learn through negotiating these closed systems, because you can't just be like, screw you. Well, I don't want the car. You can do that at a dealer. Like that is the whole MO. You walk. You can't do that. Oh, you're going to walk? We're going to come back tomorrow.
You're still getting that divorce.
Next week until we finish. Right. So it's a little bit different dynamic.
Wow, I like that. Now if I go get a car and they go, okay, and we'll throw in the car mats, I'm going to know what they're doing.
Absolutely. And they have a target that they're not talking about, And so the fact of the matter is, most people are negotiating deals based on what they want to pay, not based on any metrics. If you talk to any investment banker, any private equity, they look at companies, they're like, I want to buy a company in this space and I want to pay $5 million and I want to 10 times my money in 5 years. Do you fit into that model, right? They haven't looked at your financials. Most people can price a company without even looking at the financials, which means your financials didn't matter. So if you want your financials to matter, if you want the uniquenesses of your deal, if you want to be a unicorn, we talk about unicorns in the deal world. If you're a unicorn, nobody's going to know. Like right now, do we know if anybody's a unicorn in this room? No. We know if you tell us how you are a unicorn, you position, you anchor that number high so that you're almost proving it out, because you're never going to get that number. But if I allow you to make up the number, the odds are you're going to anchor low because you're trying to get a deal. And if you anchor low, I'm going to work to pull your number up to prove my worth. I don't want to do that. I would much rather concede, or it's more like poker. Like if you anchor it high and that's the value that you've proven out, like here's my financials, here's the other things, I have patents, I have other, amazing things that you really want that could build, like you could make more money off of my company than I can. I have to show you those things, but I would rather than put a number on it and then make you negotiate me down based on logic, right? Okay, well, let me look at those numbers. Let me look at that patent. Do I really want it? And you have to kind of calculate, like, what can somebody do with that particular business? So it's, if you believe that you're really worth 5 million and you have all the data to back it, and you come back to me and say you want to pay 300,000, the answer is just no. There is no negotiation. There isn't a back and forth. The moment you back and forth in that situation, they obviously know your number was bogus, because you wouldn't do it. If you have $1 million house and somebody comes and offers you 300,000, would you even flinch? You would not, because you already and why do houses get priced like that? Nobody comes in and does an auction style process on a house. You're given a metric, you know it's probably too high, but you need to figure out what's going to rationally close the deal. So you need to go look at the house. You need to go walk in it. The realtor's going to tell you what's amazing about the house. And you're like, oh, I didn't know that. That's delightful, right? Or no, I'm going to tear it down, so I don't want to pay any more than that. You don't want to tell them they're going to tear it down, because they're going to tear down the baby, right? You don't want to go destroy these negotiations. So you're reading into what they're saying, and it's going to indicate where they are. If you're selling your company and it's a fire sale because you have a health issue, you're not in control anymore. You're going to say okay to a deal that doesn't work for you because you don't have any other options. That's never going to be your best time. Like, you have to bluff at that point, but you have to bluff hard. So if I'm in the room and I say you can't agree to any other lower value, guess what? You don't have to worry about it. You don't even have to lie or bluff. I'm going to just sit there and continue to belabor all of the reasons why this is a $5 million deal. We're never going to talk about health. We're never going to talk about any of those issues, and you're not going to speak. And that's going to be the best. Like, you're in the room, you start the negotiations, and it's a simple process, because they'll be like, oh, let's talk about, these business owners start talking, and then they'll say, well, what's your EBITDA? And they're like, don't know that. Well, no, don't say that. They just look to me and they're like, Melissa, could you answer that question? That's our handoff. Like, these are not even that complex. And they hand it off to me. I start to answer the questions. The questions don't go back to that person. They'll continue with me because now we're talking money, right? Now they'll say, okay, well, I think that this is a $4.5 million deal. And I'll be like, that's ridiculous. I've already shown you exactly why it's a $5 million deal. You haven't looked at anything. So I'm thinking that maybe we should take some time so that you can understand the nuances of this deal. And we can certainly talk about it. What do you want to talk maybe in 2 weeks? And they'll be like, well, no, we would hope to already be in play with this deal in 2 weeks. Well, then we told you where you need to come. There's other things to negotiate. Are you aware of any of the other things? We could talk about those. And then you shift them off, right? Now they're going to come at 4. I already know my guy's going to take 4.3. I already know. He's chomping at the bit. He's like, yes. No, that's what I'm there for. Like, I can't say yes immediately, right? It doesn't play into the pattern. You will then create a deal that they will retrade when they have timing on their side. So when they go through the process of due diligence and look at everything, they're going to be like, oh, you know what? I think it's really 4.3. And now you're 2 weeks from closing. Who's got the upper hand? They do. We're already invested in this, right? So again, you want to try to not have those retrades because you're negotiating from truth, the actual numbers. You're not trying to bluff any of this, but you're getting them to see the value that the value is worth. So these might not be huge home runs unless you position it properly, but there's just psychological patterns of old school negotiation, and you can't control things. I mean, that's a cardinal with the divorce, with any sort of negotiation. You can't control the other person. You can only control how you position it and what your response time is or how you respond. And if you practice these with your client already, like when they say 4.5, are you going to be like, oh my gosh, yeah? No, you're going to be quiet, right? And they're like, but Melissa, you're not going to let a 4.5 deal go away. I'm not. But I tell them what the psychology is. Once I tell them, they're like, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I can be patient. Patience is not anybody's, it's not even my strong point. It's nobody's strong point, but that's what's required. When you play chess, checkers, any game, you make one move. You sit. The other person has to make the move. You just have to predict what moves are going to come next and be planning on what you're going to do so that you don't need the time to think. You've already thought it out. Then you're just, you're using time as like, I might sit there and think. I don't need to think. I know what the next move is. But if I make it too fast, right? They're going to be like, wait. They're going to now. So it's all psychology. That's why I think it's probably really fun.
It's like a lot of preparation.
Yeah.
You've done it enough. You're preparing your client. And then, as you said, knowing that you control you.
Right.
You can't control them.
Right.
And then coming from logic and real facts and data.
Yeah. And if we move into like divorce mediation, most people think it's sort of like the Wild West, right? So, we were in a mediation last week and the attorney's like, well, I just want to see what happens. And I was like, there's no reason to see what happens. I'm going to tell you what happens. But we had a lot of people in the room and I had some people on my side. And a lot of times, like, I'm just in their ear. Like, it's like the FBI, like they're negotiating, but like I'm in a closed room and like I'm telling them what to do. So I wrote down the numbers. It was a 4-hour mediation. And within the first 5 minutes, I wrote down what the final offer was going to be, where we would end this entire process. And I do this a lot just to show everybody in the room. They're like, how could you absolutely predict it? Well, it's numbers. So I know where they started. I know where we started. I know all of the pieces. And I also know what they want the most, where they're going to how they're going to shift the pendulum and all the factors. And I do it. It's more so just fun as a predictive measure because it's people don't believe that there's the patterns. So the attorney's like, well, we'll just see what happens. And I was like, no, these are the steps. Where are you going to go when this happens? She's like, well, you don't know if that's going to happen. I was like, no, it's categorically going to happen. What are we going to do? So it's a lot of like mock mediations that we go through, mock trial, mock depositions. We're always going in and pressure testing it and actually doing it in a live format. Like, we can talk all day long about what we're going to talk about on the podcast until it turns on. That's when things happen. So if you can start that and you do it so that they do get nervous, like, what happens if you're nervous about this, right? Well, if you've practiced long enough, you're not going to get nervous. You're not going to make those mistakes because you've already made, I was like, don't say that. Right? Absolutely don't say that. But we practice it. And if you know methodically what's going to happen, because at the end of the day, we're talking about financial negotiations, right? Numbers only go so many different versions or so many different ways when you have like a certain set of circumstances, right? You only have a house and a retirement plan. There's not a million different ways that this works. Everybody else may interpret that. So if you prep it, so a lot of times I'm prepping the client without the other professionals because they're like, I don't need to prep for this. Like, mediations, it's just going to happen. Whatever happens is going to happen. Okay. So I started to be like, okay, what's the patterns in those mediations? What's a pattern in a 4-hour mediation as opposed to an 8-hour mediation? And then if I told you that everything happens in the last 45 minutes, do you ever want to do an 8-hour mediation? No. Why would you even do a 4-hour mediation? Let's escalate the timing so it kicks in faster. And so then people have the pressure on to actually make their final and best, or we're going to walk away. We're going to walk away because it ends, right? And then we have to all come back again and, oh, we don't want to do that. That seems like too much, right? So you're kind of using those negotiation tools, but my clients have already practiced. I'm the only one in the room that knows their bottom number, their bottom line. They're not going to tell the mediator. They're not going to tell their lawyer. Lawyers are going to kill me. They're not going to tell anybody. They've only told me, and I will never expose it because in these negotiations, in divorce, we all know each other. There's just a handful of people in any town. Lawyers, mediators, people, professionals, experts. There's not a lot of us. So you're more likely to expose the strategy when your friend is in the room and you go out in the hall and you're like, hey, like, my guy will go at 4.3. You just need to come to it. You've exposed my bottom line. I'll never get the 4.3 now. So I'm always the only one that knows that number. And then my client doesn't get to say yes until I say yes. And when I say yes, they carte blanche can start talking. They can say whatever. Like, we've sealed the deal. They pretty much can't ruin it at that point. Although, I mean, they've tried. But they get ahead of themselves. But you've come in very clear. You create a position statement that guides everyone. You have a settlement offer that you introduce a week before mediation, so everybody's already thinking it. You come into mediation, you say, hey, we made a settlement offer. What do they think? The mediator goes over, gets everything that you need to know about what they think, brings it back to you. You write everything down. It's everything that they've told them. And everything that I give to the mediator is to not play the telephone game. It's to push it over exactly. So it's in writing. It's in clear form. It's very succinct. I'm not telling a half an hour story of the backstory of like how much he hurt me. It's not emotional. It's financial. It's really very clear. Like, deal with your therapist with all the rest of it. But when we come into mediation, it has to be a very uniform, united team that everyone has a part to play. Everyone's talking in a certain capacity. Now, other people aren't going to know that that's what's happening. They're just going to be like, oh my gosh, you guys are really efficient. We've practiced. This took hours to get to this level, right? But when it's high dollars, when we're talking millions of dollars, and you have one shot, maybe in theory, and then at the end of the day, if you have a toxic person that doesn't want to negotiate, you walk away. Like, that's when you use that old school tactic. Like, you get up. Oh, the 4 hours isn't over? Guess what you can't do? You can't negotiate if I'm not in the room. You leave. And they're like, oh, we can't leave. And I was like, no, we're going to get up. You start packing up. Like, we're not anywhere close in this negotiation. And it's not a bluff. It's if you prepared all of that with the numbers and they just want to do lip service, you walk out. You're going to waste your time, but it's a very strategic move. You can only make it once. You can't bluff on it, but you stand in your offer and go to trial if they don't want to negotiate fairly. And you've anchored the deal in data, third-party data, lists. Oh, here's $100,000 that you moved in cash. Where did it go? Hey, we'll wait a couple weeks while you go figure it out. Now they got to pay their lawyer. They got to do some work. Like, no, they're just coming in to tell you what you're going to take. That's the power dynamic that we shift in. And that's typically women are on the lower end of that power dynamic.
That was going to be my question. You get up and you leave. What's the next move? Sounds like potentially two. They can come back, you can mediate more, or you take it to trial.
Yeah. Well, you know that old saying, like, this meeting could have been done through an email? This mediation could have been done in an email. If you are really prepared, you're literally just going to mediation to allow the space, allow the time, and allow the patience to take place. You still have to play the game. Like, you can't finish a chess game in 3 minutes. That's not how it's going to work. It's still going to take you an hour, even if you can clearly see how you're going to win. So you have to allow the dynamics to play out. So that's really what you're going to mediation, is that you're hyper prepared. They're not prepared, right? They don't even, because they're like, we're winging it. You're winging it. No, we came in with this whole plan. So it also exposes like whether the mediator is biased. It exposes whether they're negotiating in good faith. It exposes whether they want to work more or if they want it done today. You know, all of those things take place, but also mediation is because what the mediator says is your mock trial. They're looking at your position, your settlement, your proof, and they're going to the other side and figuring out, like, what's the problem here? Because this looks good. Why don't you settle for this? They're going to say, well, I don't like it. I don't want to pay that much. Okay, but what's your proof? Well, I don't have any proof. I just go tell them to just come lower, come higher, do whatever. It exposes. So now the mediator comes back in and tells you what they said, but they're also going to try to convince you to negotiate off of your position, negotiate against yourself. Right? So what do they say? Where do they go? What do they think is weak? What do they think is strong? So it's your first chance to understand what could happen in court with the bystander that hasn't seen anything, right? This is your first time of seeing the mediator. Guess what happens in trial? That's the first time that the judge seizes any of your financials. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. They didn't look at anything. They didn't read anything beforehand. They're just like, okay, tell me a story, right? So you're telling a story in mediation to see the response. Did people like the story? Was it convoluted? Did they get it? What did they get? What didn't they get? After that first mediation, you pivot, you redo. By the second mediation, it should close, period. If everybody's came to, and now they're prepared, right? They weren't prepared at the beginning. Now, that sometimes works in your best interest because they're going to make rash decisions, right? But you still have to go write out the documents. You're still going to leave that mediation writing up the documents. So this negotiation is going to continue for all the little nuances. The mediation is to get the big things, like an LOI or a letter of intent is like, here's the deal price, here's the big terms, but then we got to go write a 100-page agreement. It's the same process. So you're getting these big things cemented and you're not going to go back on those negotiations, but there's going to be a whole bunch of little stuff. And it's just usually handled in emails at that point. It's a lot more efficient. So it could have been handled in email, but everybody's kind of winging it. So you go in hyper prepared, they're not, and you win. The patterns are consistent almost every single time.
The story you were telling about how you wrote down the numbers, I want to know what were the reactions when they saw your number and was like, she was right?
So The deal, so this was, the lawyer doesn't yet know that was the number. So as all of our team and the client knew that was what the number was. And so I asked them this last week. I was like, do you guys know where the offer is right now? Because of course we went back and forth after the mediation, and I said it's exactly at what I said it would be. And they're like, yeah, we don't understand how you could have predicted it. And again, some of it's luck or chance, but if you do this enough times, like if I'm doing 10 to 20 mediations a month and you're doing one a month, you have 1 year of experience that I have in like 2 weeks, right? So it's just like velocity of seeing the same pattern, these same types of dynamics. Most families have one person that controls the money, that makes the money, and one that is not as fluid around it. So it's just leveling that a little bit. But in most of the time, everybody else takes credit for it. And I just kind of sit back and pat myself on the back. We had a case out of state where the person already had a lawyer and a financial expert, but they weren't listening to her. They couldn't prove some of the things. So we worked for 10 months to prove that the assets were not separate. They were all marital. We were told that if she hired us, that they would leave and they would fire her. And she couldn't afford that because she had already paid $100,000 to these people and she just wanted to get through it. So we flew in for the mediation. I was in a room set up sort of like the FBI sets up monitors. Her son was in IT. I was listening to the conversation. So she was on Zoom mediation. Her lawyer and her expert never, still to this day, don't know that I exist. They think that she and her son somehow created an entire trial schedules, all the analysis and everything. And I remember we were in mediation for 10 hours, and every time I tell her like what to say, and I'm like, tell them to recalculate the numbers. And she's like, and she's texting, she's like, I don't understand. I said, when I do these things, I'm like, just repeat what I texted you. Recalculate the numbers. Re-add the numbers. They read out of the numbers. They're like, oh, geez, we were like $500,000 off. And I was like, yeah, mathematical error, right? So they fixed that number. And we come back and there was a couple other things. And I was like, don't give on that. Just say these words. And they said those words. So we finish the mediation. We get to a settlement. She walks out of the room. The recording I could still hear the other people talking in the room. Lawyer and financial expert are like, good job. We did so great on this. I'm so glad. And I just sat there and I'm like, 10 months we prepped every exhibit that they used. We prep, to this day, I just wonder, did they just gaslight themselves? Did they know that I was in the background doing everything? I mean, because it was the entire financial position. Like we had position statements, we had all the proof. They just basically showed up and executed based on me telling her what to tell through literally something in her ear. And that's what we're having to do in situations in these high net worth divorces is I'm coming in as like a strategist, like the freaking FBI, which is kind of exciting as well. But like, it shouldn't have to be like that. You shouldn't have to be bullied in the process or told that we'll leave you high and dry, because we did. We called another attorney in that area, somebody I knew, somebody that's very well respected. And he said that we would owe him $100,000 retainer and he would take on the case. And I was like, I have the entire financial case. We have months until trial. Like, I just need you to mediate this. I will tell you what to do. And he's like, $100,000 deposit for me to enter the case. Those are undeniably ridiculous parameters to force women to be in. And so I was like, no, I might not be able to share, everything, but I can share this knowledge. I can share the pattern recognition. I can share, these tactics that work hand over fist, or I can be in the room and protect you from it, which means we don't tell everybody what's happening. If we know the pattern and they don't want to necessarily be a part of it, right? We don't ever shift the power dynamic by power and control. We shift it by knowledge, being patient, and letting them walk down the path, right? Like, we know this already. This is how we teach our husbands to do a lot of things as well. So we make them think it's their idea. I mean, that's the basis of a lot of this. Like, an attorney is egotistical. A lot of them are, like, think that they're the smartest person in the room. A business owner also thinks they're the smartest person in the room. You're not going to come in and get very far if you tell them they're wrong. You're a jerk. You're egotistical. They're going to be like, who are you? Right? So you come in and instead be like, well, look at this. Look at these financials. Look at this. Walk them down the path so that they then want that deal. And guess what? You never get to say, I gotcha. You never get to say, ha ha ha, you could have gotten more. Those are just things. I never get to say, I did that deal. I get to go home at night and be like, wow, we did some amazing stuff. And I rarely get to talk about it. So even though sometimes on podcasts I get to talk, but this was a deal that, I had to let time lapse for, right? And even now, if people I can't tell you the state I did it in. I can't tell you the location that I flew into. We were even thought that we were being tracked with, we have private investigators typically on, we had a case where we staked out a house for 7 days. And by the time we entered, the whole place was gone. The safe was gone. The money had already been depleted over time. You can't move more than 10,000 in cash because the bank's going to trigger it. I don't work in the real world. I work in the world where people do not care about the law. They don't care about the court system. Doesn't have police. If they tell you to do something and you don't want to, and you move the money, you're just going to wait until they move it back? No, you have to be proactive. You need to see the patterns. You need to plan in the dark. And so it's a lot of covert strategy that I don't typically get credit for, but is how you win. You don't win by controlling them. You win by setting the foundation, laying the board so that they walk into the deal that's best for you. And if they don't, then you're going to do better in trial, which is always the metric that you would go to trial then at all times.
Yeah, it gets back to facts. Again, trying to exert power, name calling, whether it's in business deals or in life. Where's that going to get you?
Yeah.
Doesn't work.
Yeah.
And if it does one time, where does that get you?
And when I became a financial expert witness, one of the things that I had to do was drop the ego. And so when I'm on the stand and somebody, and this used to be somebody could call my children out of their name, and I would have to be like, I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. Could you repeat it? And the more that I could just get out of ego and not want to take credit for these negotiations, right? The more, and women have a better capability of doing that. Even when you want to scream, I'm right. You guys are stupid. This is crazy. There's only 2 ways to split. You want to say all of those things, but you just have to, you have to show it in documents. You have to show them a picture so the numbers paint the picture and paint the story so that you don't seem emotional. You don't seem triggered by this. It's not my circus. It's not my monkeys kind of situation. That's what I would have to repeat to myself. I'm just coming in to show the numbers. We don't call it marital waste. We call it questionable expenses, questionable transfers. Could you just show us? I'm sure that there's a real reason for that, but just show it. We want all the because here's all of the documents of how it happened, and there's 100,000 missing or 1 million missing, and we just want credit for half of it. But certainly, if you have the proof to show that because they're just questionable, we're just questioning them, then. Oh, no. I'm not going to give you credit for 500,000, but maybe 400,000. great. And it just might have been a list, a very simple list, but it told a story to you. It told a story to an innocent bystander. So it's getting out of that. A really toxic person is going to negotiate based on words, and we have to negotiate based on data. And if the data doesn't support it, then you're matching words to words. It's like a he said, she said. Guess what happens with anybody coming into a he said, she said? They don't know all of the nuances. And then, you know, we like to say there's like 3 sides to every story. So they're going to look at the third side. They're going to be like, oh gosh, you got hurt. You got hurt. That expert seems smart. Your expert seems smart. That lawyer seems like they know what they're doing. So like, let's just split it down the middle. And you haven't gotten anywhere. So that's where I was like, I don't think I want to do that anymore. I think I want to have a sound foundation to negotiate from. And at any point, if somebody presents that to you, you're going to be like, oh, okay. You're just going to, well, I don't want to. Now you look like a toddler negotiating, right? Like that's not going to work when we're talking numbers. And so you allow the numbers to tell the story, and then you sit in silence and wait for the response. And you only pivot if they bring a good side to the story. Well, you know what? That $50,000 that was transferred was to the IRS. Thank you. I figured, you know, it was paid on April 15th, but, you know, why would you take $50,000 out of cash or $60,000 and you only paid $40,000 to the IRS? So we're still missing $20,000. I mean, anytime you start to see cash movements, that's how you hide money. Like even in forensics and in fraud, there's not a million ways to hide money. Like there's only a handful. So if you don't see where it ends and what the result is going to be, you're just going to waste time chasing down all these rabbit holes that actually don't equate to anything, right? Oh, they move money offshores. You have to move it on your body. Did he go offshores? Well, no. Okay, then there's a trail. There's a transfer. There's something that happened. We have to find the trail. And we don't have to find the whole thing, just enough to paint a story that wrecks your credibility, shows that you lied, and tells you to have to provide me with the answers. Now you have to make your attorney work. But more so, you have to do the work. And most toxic, very wealthy people do not want to do the work to prove that they're right. You should just take my word for it. I'm right. I'm, you know, and so even, or they say, my business is worth nothing because I'm getting divorced. Oh, I thought you were a good business person. Well, I am. Well, you were saying to your wife that this was worth $10 million, you know, so it's the juxtaposition. It's just showing the contrast. And in the contrast, the gray is where you negotiate. It's not in the black or white. It's when you create the gray. I don't know, if you want to work and find out all those 20 items, that might be worth it to you. If there's legit backing, then you're going to do that, right? That's the psychology most people would do. But we can't get into the psychology of what a normal person would do. If they're trying to defraud you or trying to get back at you or have some sort of issues, they're not normal. You got to play by a different game.
I like the letting go of the ego and not yelling back and, you know, getting to the point where you don't have to have credit for everything and not screaming about, you know, look at me, etc. And those are all, I think, great things just in life and professionally. I'm curious, you just exude just knowledge, confidence, power, this advocate for your clients. I wonder, when you walk in, how you are perceived or how you are first taken. You know, what do you see on the other side of the table? Like what is that like?
You know, there's a psychology in that as well, that you have to come in a little bit meeker. You know, I typically hope they haven't totally watched my social media platforms because they're going to see. But at the end of the day, again, if the truth is the truth and you're positioning the truth, then that's what's going to prevail. So when I walk in, it is very confident. You know, when we're getting our clients prepped to do this, I'm like, I need you to go to the grocery store and I need you to ask for something for free. And they're like, oh my gosh, that's so uncomfortable. I can't. Like, go up to the deli. I don't care what you do. Just ask something for free. They might say no. They might say yes. I want you to negotiate with your family members, with your children, right? I want you to use these tactics so that they don't seem unfamiliar when you ask an incredible ask, right? Because you're going to tell everything in that kind of response. So for the most part, as a woman in a male-dominated space of negotiation, I will be overlooked, or, you know, they will automatically think that they're going to out-negotiate me. So that's just an automatic. So I don't try to change that immediately. I just try to allow it. And, you know, I have a lot of clients that are very, like, typical toxic partners. Males are going to, especially if you get into the world of narcissism, which I don't try to play in, I try to just say toxic. They marry beautiful people. They marry amazing people. Like they're not marrying, you know, down. They're taking these amazingly beautiful, wonderful, business-oriented people, and they're trying to crush them over that marriage. But at the end of the day, we're walking in a little bit kind of the dumb blonde kind of thing. Like we let the numbers and the negotiation, everything is sent beforehand. When I walk into the room, I'm like, hey, we sent an offer. We showed you our position. What do they say? And we had this happen in a mediation. And I said, if they come to our room first, they're going to try to manipulate us. What do you think they did? And so again, the more I tell people what's going to happen, and then when it does happen, they're like, oh man. And I was like, I know that because they're it was a biased mediator and a biased financial neutral. We already knew that. So let's expose it. So they come to our room first. I'm like, why are you in the room? We already gave you an offer. Yeah, but we just want to see, like, are you willing to take less? Well, you're not asking me the same questions that you're going to go ask the man, right? Two men are not going to go ask the man, are you going to take less? No, you're going to come here first. We already gave an offer. We have an offer outstanding. So a lot of times I'm letting the lawyer kind of be the aggressive person. If there's a lawyer in play, I'm letting the business owner be kind of the, I don't know what's going on, because usually that is kind of the truth, you know, or the outspouse, the wife, you know, and we have a lot of dynamics where the wife is the power person and the husband's on the outside. Some in politics and like Real Housewives and things like that. There's a lot of dynamics that happen. So I'm not trying to be gender specific, but the one person that's kind of out. But when we show up, it's just very clear. It's very concise. I'm not making small talk. I'm not there. Like, I'm gauging everything the moment I walk in. I'm gauging where people sit, who talks first, what they say, how they say it, what they're stumbling on. Like, I'm more active listening than talking. And mostly people want to talk more. And so they're going to tell you everything that you need to do. But in negotiation, you need to lock them into their answer first before you slice their head off. Like, so I can't necessarily assume anything. There's no assumption. So I'm going to ask some questions. I need to verify, like, your offer is 7.7 million, but I didn't see, like, are you going to need to have a take back? Are you going to need this? Like, what's the payment terms? You know, I was confused. So you have to lock them into their position, and then you come with evidence to show them that their position is wrong. Because if you lead saying, like, I know your position is this, but you're wrong, they're going to snake out of it. They're going to pivot. They're going to move, like, if they're smart, right? So you're usually coming in very underestimated, I think, you know, and so quiet sometimes is interpreted as like, you don't know as much. So I think that's where you have to be, is just like, not the force to be reckoned with going into it. You know, I scream and rage when I go home or late at night and be like, oh, why did that, you know, but you just have to be watching. Nothing that happens should be an unknown. You should have already practiced everything. everything is just, are they acting as if I've already predicted, so that my whole team is sitting back and be like, oh yeah, okay, they did come into the room first. And I was like, I told, like I'm sitting, I'm like, I told you so, and then I'll write down what my prediction is of their offer that they're coming in for. And they're like, how did you know? Again, is it clairvoyance? Maybe. Do I trust my instincts and my intuition? Do I hone that? Am I shown signs of how to go? Yes, but it's pattern recognition. It's knowing this 1,800 times of doing it. But you can't lead with ego. Like, they're going to say stuff. I can't always correct them financially. If it's not going to be beneficial for me to correct them financially, then I'm going to look like the jerk. If I'm like, that's not how you say it. That's not, other than if my point is to make them look like a jerk, and they say, well, what's the net income? What's listed on and they say something on the tax return. Like, I want to sometimes expose that the other side's attorney doesn't know what they're talking about, or that they don't know what they're talking about, but you do it financially. And sometimes that's lost on most people. But at the end of the day, who's going to understand what you're saying. And the more you speak in terms that you do lose people, like you talk above them in some capacity, but it's based on knowledge, most people are not going to ask questions and claim that they don't know it. So I'm going to preempt them and be like, maybe you don't understand because you said this, and that's not an asset, that's a liability. But, let's talk about it. What does it mean? So it's educating where it's necessary. But no, I have to really prep myself when I go into, not showing up as kind of a little bit more passive. I do a lot of self-talk of just allow them to walk down the path and lay their own bed. And then, we come in for the kill. So it's a lot of patience, but I don't think that you can fake that you're confident. And so I usually just want the whole team to show up unified, or else it exposes our weaknesses. And so everybody has a role, and it's self-described good guy, bad guy, villain. I usually get the villain, but you can't lead with the villain. So you kind of have to come in, just very prepared, and let the numbers speak for themselves. Because if they don't, then it's just lip service, and it's going to fall anyway.
Yeah, preparation, experience, knowledge can then lead to confidence.
Yeah. If you already know how it's going to end, I'm just watching the movie. I'm just allowing it to play out. A lot of times when I'm not telling everybody all of the process, it's because they'll mess it up. They'll go too fast. They'll skip over some of the steps, and we need it to be more methodical. I've actually had to be in really difficult mediations with my family when we had a wrongful death suit, and I couldn't tell the family members what was going to happen. And I said, there's going to be a point where you're going to get really triggered, and I'm going to say things that if you emotionally lose it, that's going to be okay. But I'm telling you right now, I can't tell you what I'm going to say. And it played out exactly like I did. And I said, your response is going to be your organic response to that thing that happens. And so a lot of times I want everybody to be organically responding, even if I know the pattern. So I tell them enough so that they know where we're going, but not enough to ruin the steps or go too fast, right? Because they want it to be done. Everybody wants it to be done. They don't like the conflict. So if you know that, you can't tell them everything, and I used to be very okay, I'm going to tell you every single thing so that you're ready for it. And then they would jump to the step 10, and I'm like, so I had to start to kind of keep a little bit to myself and then allow it to play out. And at the end of the day, it's not going to maybe get exactly where you want it, but it's going to be better than if you went a different way. Yeah.
Wow. I'm sitting here thinking, you broke the rules and you're winning, in breaking the rules and doing it your way, but your way that was intentional and you tested and you saw and was an intellectual, educational way of approaching it, not just haphazard.
At the end of the day, both spaces, strategically in M&A or even in divorce, was really women were not benefiting. Like, they were getting screwed over. And I wasn't being like, I took advanced mediation, I took advanced, all of the, at some point, and a lot of systems that are in play of even how to do a deal or how to do a divorce, right? How to negotiate. I had to get rid of it because it was all based on old power dynamics, old negotiation, where I'm going to tell you what you're going to do. And the moment that I started to see that could be broken by knowledge and data, and I was like, game changer, right? Because there's no other way to take power from somebody. You cannot take power from somebody. You cannot take control of something. You can only lay the foundation so that it's the perfect ground for everybody to see the truth and to naturally go to progress towards what would be reasonable for everyone. But if I told you that, it's like a kid. Like, if mom tells me or dad tells me, like, I'm going to ignore it. But a stranger tells you and you're like, oh, that's great advice. It's the same thing. Like, if you're told that that's what's going to do, it's not going to work. So I had to abandon most organizations, most methodologies. And I was doing such a velocity because as an expert witness, I was in mediations as the expert. So I was watching that mediator fail, that strategy fail. And then I started to work directly with the couples. And I was like, hey, you guys want to control things? Work with one person. So we would value it. We would look at all the numbers, but I would just expose the number. Like, here's the truthful value. Here's not go high, go low. Like, here's a substantiated value. Let's put that number in, right? Let's put that number into the equation. Now, you know what? There's only a couple ways to split this pie. Do you want it kind of even? Okay, well, what do you prefer? Do you prefer the peach side or the blueberry side, right? And they do an analogy about an orange a lot. Like, do you want the inside of the orange or the outside of the orange? Or do we need to cut it down the middle? Well, cutting it down the middle doesn't always work. What if I just need the rind to make something, right? My cocktails. What if I need the inside to make the juice? Like, I might want to split those, and I might think that that's very fair if I'm given all of the knowledge. And so I think that, at the end of the day, people have to be retrained on how to negotiate from the truth, because most negotiation is from manipulation, and manipulation usually puts women on the outside of it. And so I come in as a strategist. Here's the strategy. Now let's play it out. In the situation where I came in and I told everybody the number from one document, it took them 4 months. 4 months to wrap their head around this, of discovery, of asking for more documents, of trying to negotiate, doing all of these things. And they can't, we actually had to sweep the team and get rid of everyone because they just couldn't wrap their head around how we were going to quickly and efficiently negotiate. That's the biggest thing. When you even started, you're like, it's really hard. It's really complex. What if it's not? What if there's a pattern? And if you follow the pattern, you save time, effort, and money. It took them 4 months to figure it out. We came back, we swept the team, we pulled in the right people. And I'm like, okay, so let's start again. Here's the number. Here's what we're going to do. Put these in play, put all of these steps in play, because it's like a domino effect. And in any of these things, you're even creating the story to unfold, right? You're using emails to create the story and the pattern that you're going to eventually use. It takes a lot of foresight. When I used to read books, I used to read the end. And people would be like, that is insane. And I was like, yeah, I read the last page. I was like, I just want to know how this is going to end, so that I know if I'm even willing to go down this path. And that's with forensics, that's with negotiation. If you're not willing to put all the time and effort, if there wasn't going to be this pot of gold at the end, why are you doing all this work? Why are you going at it blind? But people in these spaces get paid by the hour. They don't get paid by results. They get paid if you continue to fight. They get paid because people are conflict averse. So if I come in and tell everybody, hey, we're going to be done in like a month, I've cut everybody off their cash flow. I'm not the liked person. So we usually have to sweep shop and get new lawyers, new advisors, new experts, everything. And I'm just the strategist, and everybody then moves towards in that endeavor. And so I think like my goal is to break how divorce is done. And once I break it, I will exit. But we shouldn't be going through the court system. These are families that there's only a few ways to, like, this is a pot of money that the more you spend out of it, the less you have to do something with. And the more you fight and pay these people, it's not going to work. I've been in that space. I've worked on all sides of this equation. There's a better way. And I think that women benefit from a better way specifically, but it's typically the out spouse. It's the spouse that doesn't have the financial knowledge that benefits. Male, female, doesn't really matter. It's sort of like the underdog. And these strategies work. And you can employ them yourself. And the more you know, then you can guide your team. And the more your team knows and is cohesive, they will just work. And at the end of the day, most people have to co-parent. So do you want to hate everybody? Like, do you want to create something? When you buy a company, you're going to have to work together. Do you want to hate each other because you've negotiated and gotten every last penny? No, most people don't. If you talk to most people, they're like, I just want what's fair. The court doesn't care about fair. So if you want fair, if you want reasonable, you have to create it. And I think that's what we've been focused on.
Well, and it's something that we'd sort of kicked around ahead of time. I mean, divorces, you go that far, they're expensive. I mean, on average, if you have to go to court, all of that, what would a divorce cost?
Let's say a simple divorce, like one of your clients' divorce, like they have $1 million or $2 million, right? It's a house, it's a retirement, they have jobs, things like that. Easily $100,000, $50,000 for each side. Now, if you go to trial, 90% of cases actually don't go to trial. Like the crazy part is 90% of cases settle. The problem is they settle on the courtroom steps. So they settle the week before. So you've gone through 18 months of paying everybody, and then you settle. We had one settle last week. 2 years we've been in it. We had trial on Tuesday, and they settled at 3:00 on Monday. You've already paid the lawyers. We've already prepped for trial. You're not saving any money you're saving 8 hours of people's time. You've already paid them the trial retainer. My retainer is non-refundable. I'm prepped to go the day before, right? So $100,000, and you might pay $25,000 for trial day each. Because again, it's still coming out of theoretically the same marital pie, but you're paying two people, two business valuation experts to go to court. And the judge is like, I know both of you. You're great and you're great. Let's split the baby. Let's split it down the middle. Well, we know that that's not the value. Pension values, all of these things everything just kind of goes to the middle. Well, if you're going to go to the middle already, why not escalate it into mediation? Why not find people that maybe work on fixed fees? Because if we're on fixed fees, I'm motivated to be more efficient, right? Because I'm not going to make more in this process. But I think at the end of the day, it's depleting families' wealth, and you're going to have less to work with, which is then going to create that you're going to try to grab more as the time goes on. So it's really kind of getting ahead of the game and saying, okay, we don't want to enter in this process. Like, is there a better way? In valuation and mediation, they basically said that I couldn't do the valuation and still be the neutral mediator because I'm giving a number, right? Which is an opinion. And then I'm going to mediate it. So I was like, okay, fine. I'll just do the valuation. You guys mediate it. All my clients would come for a joint valuation and be like, hey, could we just continue working with you and just get the rest of this fixed? So I was like, yeah, but nobody thinks it can be done like that. So we started doing that for years. And I was like, wait a second. because I know what the person who doesn't know anything about money, I know how to manipulate money. So I'm just going to expose it. I'm going to expose, hey, I think you run some personal expenses through your business, but we can just adjust it. Do you think it's like $100,000 of personal expenses or like 50,000? Or do I need to go through all the bank statements? It's probably 50,000. Okay, great. So if we make that adjustment, is that reasonable? Yes. Now I just saved you $20,000 in forensic fees, right? Because we could honestly talk in a confidential manner that everybody runs personal expenses through their business. Like, why are we ignoring these? Like, I'm not there to tell the IRS. Your judge would. Your judge works for the government. The IRS is the government. They work for the same people. So, that's happened in a case where they said, we need to stop the case. When I said, Judge, this tax return is wrong. Well, how could you possibly know it's wrong? They used my number from the analysis of what their income was. And he's like, okay, well, they used your number. My number was for 9 months of results. Where's the other 3 months? I know they did something in those 3 months. I don't know what they did, but I know they did something. He's like, we need to take a break. They came back. They asked me one more question and they settled that day. Now we settled for something that we never would have gotten because they messed up and we found it at the trial date, right? So again, some of this is blind faith and luck, but it's strategic. One little thing could move the needle and you don't have to expose everything. So it's a whole different space. And again, most mediators are still not neutral, right? And so I have a lot of clients that will be like, well, how are you unbiased? I'm like, everybody has bias. I just want to expose all of it, right? Like, well, I have separate property and I had this inheritance. Well, you need to trace it through the steps. Like, did you keep it separate? Like financial planners, like one thing I think financial planners should do with any separate asset, all income on that separate asset should be diverted to a different account. Like, preserve that separateness. But they're like, oh, I came in with this and I came in with that. I'm like, well, could you guys both know that? Could we give you credit for it? Well, I don't know if that's totally fair. Okay, well, what is fair? So it's actually coming up with rationale without having to do all of the math in there. But the bias is that I want to expose where there could be manipulation. Like, hey, I looked at your tax return and it looks like you're only making 10 grand, but you live in $1 million house. And because and the wife was like, yeah, that's my question. Like, how are we reporting $10,000 on the tax return, but we live, our mortgage is $10,000 a month. How is that possible? So I said, hey, what's the distribution? Where's your K1? And on box 16D for most part, but somewhere around there on the K1 is a line called distributions. That's a number that's not going to hit your tax return, right? 500,000. I said, well, you distribute 500,000. It's just that you only have 10,000 of reportable income. And that, no, we don't need to go fix it in the IRS. Everything's fine. We're not assuming anything is going wrong there. But the accountant came in and said, oh yeah, no, we distribute 500,000 or more, right? Because he's got 17 entities, but we only have to report because we have real estate that makes nothing and operating entities that make a lot of money, and they net out some, like, that's a proper tax planning strategy that confuses everyone. So I'm just exposing, like, hey, let's understand it. Now, based on that information, do you feel comfortable? Do you feel comfortable? Have we described it? And everybody's moderately uncomfortable, then the deal is good. And that's a hard place to be. But like, if you walk out and you're like, I don't feel like I got everything, but this was reasonable, then that was probably a good deal. Nobody should really totally win in a truthful negotiation. So it doesn't have to be unbiased. You have to be following the truth. What is the reality? Like, I can't give you $20,000 of maintenance if I don't make that money. Like, let's figure out a different way. Let's figure out how you pay for the kids' cars or their electronics or their college. right? If you don't have the cash flow. So you kick it down the field and you negotiate on other things. But at some point you have to face reality. And most in the system, they're just going to position up, like, get the most you can. What is the most I can get? And that's usually not to the benefit of the couple or the family. So it's a much different, it doesn't have to be a peaceful process. I mean, like, I let people yell at each other and talk in any way because they're adults. But at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, have you said your piece? Yes. Okay, so what's the number? Like, can I talk to your accountant? I get the accountant involved. A lot of times in those joint mediations, I tell them to bring their own financial planner. Like, this is who's going to actually make that money go for the. I don't want to tell you how to do that. That's not my line of work, but you have a financial professional. Like, let them tell. If I go and testify on what they can make in court, it's the risk-free rate. What can you make? Hopefully a lot more, right?
Right.
So allow you to know what you can make in the real world, but I give you the rubric of what we would testify to, what we have to calculate in court and in that kind of situation. So it's and people are more than willing to give up things if they know what they are giving up. Like, the gun collection is worth $10,000. Well, I don't want it anyway. I want this tchotchke. I want the china. Well, the china's only worth $1,000. I don't care. It's got sentimental value. I'm willing to trade the gun collection for the china. But you understand that it's not even. Yeah. People do that all the time. It's not always about money. It's about positions and priorities. And that's what mediation is. I want to stay in a nice house, a safe environment that has a yard. Does it mean it has to be this house? Okay, I guess not. Great. Then you've moved them off of that position and into an interest and what they want. I want peace and safety and something I can afford. I would love for it to be in the same neighborhood. That's the hardest one. But again, it's opening them up to the possibilities that there's other options that are best for everyone, not just dollars and cents.
Wow. I mean, it's such when you see divorce on TV or, you hear about it, whether it's friends, other people, at least I do, think of it in certain ways. And hearing you talk about that, hearing you talk about, business, M&A, acquisitions in such a different approach, such a different way to think about it. Again, coming from facts, logic, take out the manipulation, and sort of that patience, calm, get rid of the ego. Sometimes you don't have to get all the credit. What a different way of thinking about it, approaching it, sort of breaking the rules, breaking the regular approach. I also think about just how that is useful in life and business too. And as you said, sometimes coming in, slow playing it. You don't have to be the first one to talk. You're going to let others do their thing first, et cetera, et cetera. Such a powerful, strong conversation today.
Yeah.
That I don't know I was anticipating, even though I know you are strong and, how hard you work for your clients and what an advocate you are. So I know I've learned so much and just what a different way and approach. It's
about knowing your worth. And I think if you really structure what your worth is and you have somebody that's kind of helping you understand what position is sound, where you can really land without having it be this pressured negotiation, I think that people get to a much better space where they're happy with the results. They understand what they gave up, what they're keeping, and they chose, what they thought was important, and they made it very clear to everyone. Like a lot of times it's hard for them to even get clear on that, and that's the beginning process is, you know, just creating a position statement, creating what you really want, and not all the noise of what somebody tells you you should have or what I got in this situation. And you really stick to, you know, and again, as an expert witness, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And a lot of times that's what my career in town has been known for, is I'm brought in when the truth needs to be told and everybody has to accept it in some capacity. And so I think that if we negotiated from that in any capacity, but you then have to have evidence, right? So as long as you have the evidence of what your truth is, or you structure it in a way that is just your truth, then I think that you will prevail regardless, because you got what you wanted and what you needed, and you identified those as priorities. So it should be more empowering than defeating in a lot of situations. But that's why we wrote Anchor the Deal. And that was like, to me, it just became very clear. And I was like, holy cow, I can't believe there's so many, you know, like when you have to like actually start to put it down, like, what is this? You know, because people would be like, what is the pattern? I was like, okay, what do I see happen all the time? And then it just kind of, you know, when I meet with people, it's overwhelming. It's a lot, you know, at the end of the time, we usually can't talk for more than an hour or 90 minutes because it's just like, it's hard to understand numbers anyway, but this is sophisticated negotiation and it's their whole strategy. I record a lot of it. I will ask them up front. I'm like, you know, this is going to be a lot. And instead of paying me to tell you it again and again and again, would you like to just record it? And you can watch it. We can pull the transcript. We can use ChatGPT to summarize it in a very nice format so that you can have the talk. Like we just talked about all these talking points and what you should do. Now we can have a list and an outline. And they're like, yeah. And so then they have the capability to rewatch it, to reread it, you know, and with AI and tools like that, like it is the best way for us to be more efficient, not to necessarily take our jobs, but to be like, hey, we just spent 90 minutes coming up with the best plan, but you didn't take good notes and I was talking the whole time. So like, I don't know what we said. At this point, even just recording it in a voice memo, running it back through chat, telling us, you know, like this is what the solution is, then they can go back and digest it. And they're not spending hours and hours and hours with me. And I'm not saying, because I started saying the same things over and over, like client after client after client. I was like, okay, there's a pattern here if you're going to say the same thing. So I think even that is unheard of in the expert space. I'm not supposed to have notes. I'm not supposed to, you know, I mean, we're doing a complicated $100 million divorce. Like we have 5 people in the room. I need you all to be on the same page, right? So in those types of situations, I think we have to start playing by different rules. You know, somebody puts me on the stand, like, do you have notes? I'm like, yeah, I'll give you the AI notes and it's going to tell you exactly what you should do as well, you know, or how'd you get that client, Melissa? Do you get all your clients from TikTok? I'm like, just this one, you know, like, I mean, we have to start taking some of this that is going to make us efficient, which could make us less money, but we're going to have better outcomes. I think that's really where things are moving. So you embrace it or not. If you don't embrace it, I'll see it as opportunity for me anyway. So, but
well, that's a great point and a great way to wrap it up, because I think, you know, it's getting back to, like you said, the facts and the data. And who wouldn't want to work for somebody who said you're going to get the better outcome? And it's about the client. It's about what's best and right for them. And so who wouldn't want to work with somebody?
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. So
if you follow this methodology, if you follow the pattern, the outcome is inevitable. You cannot mess it up. because it's just calculated moves that are in writing. You're not, oh, I forgot what I was supposed to say. It does not matter. It was already committed. We already practiced. Everything is in play. The outcome is inevitable.
So you mentioned TikTok. You're on TikTok, but what are all the ways that everybody can find you and know more or contact you to work with you?
I think the easiest way is anchorthedeal.com, and that's where you can find a lot of this methodology, whether you can use it for your own good or ways to connect with us. But that's probably the easiest, and you can Google, fortunately or unfortunately, my phone number and everything is very public, and everybody has it. And people, my clients, I would say I have balance, but my phones are all on do not disturb for the majority of the time. And then I just check them in batches. But anchorthedeal.com is probably going to be the best way. So, but I very much appreciate being asked on your podcast, and this is amazing of how you lift women up. So I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for coming today and sharing so much great information.
This concludes another episode of the She Lift Project podcast. To hear more episodes of the show, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And to learn more about our mission of helping women reach higher levels of success, visit sheliftproject.com and sign up to receive the latest news, ebooks, videos, and more.